What are the stories telling us on a deeper level? It's easy to consume stories. It's harder to apply the lessons.
And action.
Join us as we watch well. All right. Welcome to the WatchWell Podcast, everybody, where we view stories through the lens of truth. My name is Parker, and this is Nik. We are your hosts. So, Nik, why a podcast?
Well, why a podcast might be a little different than why this podcast, but I'll just go with why this podcast, because with WatchWell, you already talked about we're viewing stories through the lens of truth, and the concept, the idea for this podcast came from when I was watching movies with college roommates and college friends and other people as well, and we would inevitably talk about what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, what the story got right, what it didn't get right. And those conversations always shifted to faith. Somehow they always shifted to the Word of God and how we interact with the world, and our fallen nature, our need for hope, and things like that. Big concepts, big truths that are in stories, and they're really prevalent there. But if you're not viewing them through that lens, then you might just ignore it and you might miss it. So that was kind of the starting point. And then from there, I was a youth pastor, and we would have movie nights on a regular basis. And rather than just watch a movie, have some popcorn, and enjoy each other, I wanted to make it something that was impactful and would still allow it to be, a Bible study, or still allow it to be a time of equipping the teens that were in our youth group. So we would watch a movie, we'd have fun together, we'd enjoy each other's company, but then once the movie was over, we would have a conversation about how does this film communicate something that is true, and how does it relate to our faith, and how does it relate to the Bible. And that was really a popular thing that teenagers like. So it kind of grew from there, and now here we are, getting ready to do this podcast, trying to equip people to do the same thing, to view stories through the lens of truth. So, Parker, what is it about that idea that struck you or stood out to you as something you wanted to be a part of?
Yeah, so I really liked the idea of practicality. You go to church on Sunday, you have that fellowship with other believers, you hear the sermon, and then it's Monday and you find yourself at work dealing with a lot of the same issues that you did the previous week. And I liked having something supplemental throughout the week that you could listen to on a drive home or a drive to work or while picking your kids up, that is very family friendly, has a lot of different options for different movies that we're going to watch anyway. Demographics from kids movies and Disney movies all the way to, more adult films in terms of like rated R and PG-13, and there's kind of a wide spectrum, but there's always a lesson in those. To echo kind of what you were saying, there's always a lesson to learn underneath the surface of each character and how characters respond to other characters and just the entire story. And Jesus told stories to teach, and that's really what ultimately captivated me. So yeah, I'm super excited. You mentioned that you were a youth pastor. Go ahead, let's introduce ourselves a little bit. Tell me a little bit about you and your life and how everything's going.
Yeah, my name is Nik. Excuse me. I am no longer a youth pastor, but I am a pastor, an elder at a church in Indiana. Have a wife, 2 kids, 13 and 4 years old. So obviously we watch movies all the time. The 4-year-old wants to do nothing but watch movies and watch TV shows. So we do that all the time. But yeah, 13 and a 4-year-old, and I'm married to my wife, Katie.
Nice. And my name is Parker, if you haven't caught that yet. And I am married. I have a wife named Kayla, and we have a son named Ronan. Movies have always been a part of my life. I actually run a film business on the side where I do wedding films and stuff like that. And even before that, I grew up in the movie theater pretty much. I mean, through middle school and high school, that was what our family did. It was either on the baseball field or we were in the movie theater. Sometimes 3 and 4 movies, 3 and 4 movies in one weekend, and sometimes it was the same movie because we just loved stories and we loved being at the movie theater. And it was, I just remember getting done with school on Friday night and there not be a sporting event. And the biggest question was pretzel bites or peanut butter M&Ms that night at the movie theater. So we've always had a good time. I grew up in the movie theater, and I'm just really excited to see where this goes. And to, like I said before, I want to help people think more practically and get better at extracting biblical truths from the media that we have today, because there's so much thrown at us, from an everyday basis. So that's who I am, and that's my hope for kind of this podcast.
Yeah, and to go off a little bit more of what you said, we could potentially do this exact same thing with just about any form of art. Like, all art is communicating something, and story is no exception. It communicates something. So we have a really good opportunity to take what it communicates. And we're not saying that every movie, in the way it communicates its message, is communicating truth. We're not saying that every single film is correct about its conclusions or correct about the message that it's portraying, but we are saying that there's bits and pieces within that can be taken out and applied to biblical truth and help us to see the Bible in a real light, because we have characters that we need to relate to. We have characters who are flawed, and their decisions aren't always right, even if the movie portrays it as right. And we can analyze that, we can review that through the lens of our faith. And doing it in stories will help us to do that very thing in our problems that we need to solve, and in other areas of life.
Right.
So that's my hope, is to help equip people to do that, help people to make that shift and make sure we're viewing things through the lens of truth.
Right. And is there anything that you want the listeners to know in terms of access to the podcast and maybe suggesting movie ideas, anything like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I love to hear people's thoughts on what movies they would like to hear us talk about. We have some ideas. I know our next episode is going to be on the movie Fences with Denzel Washington, but yeah, feel free. If you're listening to this and you want to actually be a part, if you want to actually suggest movies that we might talk about, then please feel free to do so. And Parker, I know you have some more information to share about a Patreon page.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. If you want to be a part of the movement and you want to actually help support the podcast, we're working on, it's not ready to launch yet, but we're working on a Patreon subscription service where you can donate money. And if you donate money monthly, there are different, I guess, perks to each tier. And when that goes live, we will let you know as soon as that does go live. And that's a good way to help support, the movement and the podcast. And then I know, Nick, you talked about in the future wanting to do a Bible study if they do the not a Bible study. What did you call it? You called it if they're part of the Patreon, and they would get a PDF copy of the movie reviews we did. That's what it was.
Yeah. So we would write out an article basically, and a PDF copy of that article could be, and there'd also with that be a discussion guide. So if you wanted to, host a small group over to your house and do a movie, or if you're a youth pastor and you want to do it with your youth group, we would have a discussion guide along with that, to help facilitate that.
Right. And we're new to the whole podcasting thing. So if you are listening to this, we would ask for your grace and patience as we kind of get into a routine. I don't imagine, I think we talked, I think it's going to depend. We're going to let the movie decide how long each podcast episode is going to be. I think it's going to be anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. That may change. We're not set in stone yet, but in terms of structure, I think that what we're probably going to end up doing is either talking about specific scenes from the movie. It's not going to be the entire movie. Would you agree with that, Nick?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So
We'll probably touch on the
points.
overall theme, maybe overall concept, but then, we'll definitely point to specific scenes and specific dialogue and conversations and
right. And the big things will be on the regular podcast consuming sites, whether it be Spotify, iTunes, and then for those Patreon tiers that we haven't really finished setting up yet, any of the extra content will be on that you will have access to if you do support the podcast. So yeah, man, I think that's a good introduction. Is there anything else you want to add before we sum this up?
No, I think that's it. I think we covered everything.
Awesome. So cool. Stay tuned. The next episode we do, when we actually do a movie review, will be on Fences. If you do find this podcast and you want to enjoy the first movie review through the lens of truth, go watch Fences so that you have a refresher, and then jump in next week. I think next week we're going to try and upload weekly to start off, and then that way you're fresh with the movie and you can be a part of the conversation and listen in. So awesome, Nick. Well, I'm excited for the ride, man. We'll teach some people some stuff, and I'm sure we'll learn and teach each other along the way.
Yep. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Cool, guys. We will see you next week with that first episode.